I would now like to ask Rikke Ennis, who is CEO of TrustNordisk, to join us. Also Jérôme Paillard, who is Executive Director of the Cannes Film Market, and Michael Gubbins, co-founder and analyst at Sampomedia. Please join us. There you go. Yes. You can have new glasses if you want some water there. Help yourself. I will start by asking the same question I asked the others. Could you start by talking about how your work is affected in the changes of what we're going to talk about now, and it turns out have talked about the whole morning, the distribution revolution. Jérôme.
Hello, so thank you to be here. So Jérôme Paillard, I'm the director of the Marché du Film in Cannes, but I'm also running a much smaller event in Buenos Aires called Ventana Sur, so I have more experience with that kind of event. And also I run Cinendo, which is a resource for the industry online, both a database and a streaming platform B2B. Actually, of course, in the different events I can run, I see that certainly there is a lot of questions, sometimes fears, and talks about what will be the future of cinema, even if we don't see in the B2B business really the big change now, because there is still a lot of films being produced, trying to be sold, and less money, but still a lot of players. So we try to accompany this evolution and more to offer to the producers, and we have more and more producers attending our events to help them to build what will be their future. And I agree that it's somewhere already in the contract they sign now, but the contracts sometimes are redone. And we saw that in the crisis a few years ago when everyone was coming back to the booth to say, okay, just do a new contract and forget the previous one. So hopefully we are not totally blocked, but what is signed 2 or 3 years before the film is ready. Just to give you a scoop, we will continue that discussion in Cannes this year because we create a new pavilion called Next, but Next with a T as theatrical, because maybe we will talk later, it's maybe something for me which is a little bit missing in this incredible work you do. And Next is of course everything from financing to production and to circulation.
I have two brief follow-ups there. So Next in theatrical then, do you believe that the content types that are partly maybe a film and then followed by a television series, for instance, but they belong together somehow, that category of multi-platform storytelling will grow?
Honestly, I don't know. So if we're talking about transmedia and we tried to do something last year for transmedia in film, and actually we didn't really find any very interesting things today where theater is really part of that transmedia story. So maybe it will come, but I think it's much more successful in the series world, on the TV and the documentary world, of course, where it really makes sense today.
And my other follow-up is, do you agree that perhaps what will happen with the cinema is going to be more like in the music industry, that the event aspect of going to the cinema, the experience of going to the cinema will become very important also for specialized film?
Yeah, no, I think that's really the point for me which is missing, is that going to a cinema is really an event, and it's something we should be certainly supported, and where we may have a lot of creativity on how to recreate the theatrical experience as it was at the beginning of the cinema, where it was really an event. I think also we have to consider how far the festivals are very important for that experience. Not talking about Cannes, but festivals for the public. And we see more and more festivals everywhere. In some time, unfortunately, it's maybe the only chance where a film will be in a real theater, but festivals are more and more distributors or circulators, to keep your word. And I think that's also a very important piece of the marketing of the film. So it's
very
some
good.
things we can come back later.
Thank you. Michael Gubbins.
I'm Michael Gubbins. I've founded a company called Sampomedia with a guy called Peter Buckingham, who was the former head of distribution at the UK Film Council. And what I'm also, incidentally, just to give you a slightly different perspective, I'm also the chairman of the film agency for Wales. So I'm a film funder as well.
Oh.
And I'm doing a script. I'm producing something at the moment, which is just, so I've done the stupid things. I'm coming from lots of different perspectives. The point for me, though, at the moment is this discussion always sounds so familiar to me because as a journalist, I covered music. I edited a music magazine, and I edited an information technology magazine as well during the dot-com era. And we always wanted 5-year plans. We're also, it's good, 3 to 5 years is better than 5 years. But I remember having discussions the year before Spotify came out, where the idea that Spotify doing something was just entirely, it was science fiction. You couldn't believe it. I remember pre-Google, how much Google changed things. So a lot of what we're talking about here is trying to find solutions that are based on our internal discussions. And actually, Bengt commissioned a report for me in 2005, I think, which we called Digital Revolution at the time. And the latest one actually was called Audience Revolution, because actually, at the end of it, we're not taking into account of the fact that on demand, it's that demand bit. It's not about VOD services even. It's just about the realities of the changing ways that different audiences behave. And we do not have either the data and the knowledge about those audiences, so we live on myth.
Yeah.
You know, so much people say, oh, young people do this. Well, actually, you find out quite often that young people don't do what we think they do. Or we'll say old people don't like 3D. Actually, Gravity, that was mentioned earlier, had a much older demographic. So it actually, and did very, very well. So a lot of what we think are truths aren't truths. So you're trying to get down, which is where our studies come into, what are the uniting factors? Because what we're trying to do is to find a way to aggregate different demands, different niche demands into something which is financially viable. That's where the business models are going to come for us producers. But I'll leave you with one. The key thing for me is that we have a very big disconnection. And the problem is, which I think is a serious problem for us as an industry, and unlike most industries, we don't have a connection between the people who produce things and the audience. When I look at when I'm funding films, each film is treated when they come to me for film funds as a separate thing. And we throw away things, we call them failures. We hide them away like crazy relatives in the attic somewhere. We don't talk about, we don't systematically gather up the data and the knowledge that would allow us to do it better next time. So we have a myth and a problem about the way we understand audiences. We have a disconnection between the audience and the business, and we have an idea, I think, of our business as if it was a natural state and not something that grew out of a value chain, that grew out of a way of moving physical goods about and moving 35mm prints about.
You don't hear it, but the other panelists are humming in a very yes way in the front row here. Rikke, Ennis.
Yes, my name is Rikke, Ennis, and I'm the CEO of TrustNordisk, which is one of the bigger Nordic sales agents, handling pretty much 80% feature films, and the rest would be TV series and TV content. So you could say we, as a sales agent, we are in the very middle of everything. We do not really handle the VOD rights ourselves locally, but we have close contact to very, very frustrated producers. And on the other hand, we have, of course, our dear distributors that we really want to help in any way possible. So it's really a balance today to try to make it work. And what we feel is you have a polarization of films, whereas typical art house films done by first or second time directors, they would really have a market out there a few years ago. They don't anymore because the distributors, they are so pressured, so they go for bigger films, bigger budgets, already directors with a track record and so forth. And you could say the windows chosen for those specific films are very, very conservative. So in that way, we don't really have that much knowledge about it yet. I've just been sitting in a group in Denmark, going for the next film political agreement in Denmark as well. And somehow it seems like we're talking about the same thing that we did 5 years ago. Really, I mean, very, very traditional chats about windows, And still the 4 months window is probably the one that we fight most about. But for the first time, which I think was interesting, was that we invited telcos and new partners into this small group. And they were looking at this group as dinosaurs. They were just like, Jesus Christ, what just happened? You know, because to them, they are so past what we're discussing. So it was very interesting to hear their point of view. And what we also brought to the table here is how can we find new business models to actually finance films? Because the biggest frustration with producers right now is the fact that you have a lack of money out there. You have so much content out there and so few financiers, and we have to find new ways.
Rikke, since you're in the distribution chain, one thing that many people often say is, well, we're probably going to have to negotiate on a film-by-film basis, at least in the beginning, or a project-by-project basis, until we figure out what the categories are. Then we can say, oh, this is one of these, like this is an art house film and then we figure out what those categories are going to be in the future. But until then, we're going to have a few years when we do a lot of very individual sort of structures for each film and different distribution strategies. Do you think this is at all realistic? Or, I mean, is it realistic for sales agents and distributors to cobble together completely individual deals for everything? Or do you need structural in the industry to have 2 or 3 ways, and then you just pick one of those?
Yeah, if I understand your question right, you mean when we negotiate with the distributor, whether we have, you could say, formal structures that the contracts are based on, or in what?
Well, I guess in the next few years,
yeah.
if when the window starts to wobble,
yeah.
Then we're going to see different kinds of combinations. Is that even feasible?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for now, we are also very conservative, meaning that when we sell to a distributor, we sell all rights. So they would actually go out and negotiate with, the local TV stations and DVD distributors and so forth. But of course, we have to look new ways too, because right now I can say, when we finance films, we actually have to think at some point whether we should go to a player like Netflix to sell, let's say, 2 to 3 countries first and actually get money for the financing of the film there. The problem is, once you're out there, and with this VPN thing, you can actually see the film everywhere, and then you destroy your own market. So it's a little bit like you say in Danish, peeing your pants. It's very hot in the beginning, but then it becomes cold. And
Can I just ask you a question?
Bengt.
Are you absolutely sure that you have destroyed your market? Do you know that?
No, we don't know. You mean if we sell to Netflix?
Yeah. Do you know that you actually destroy it, or is it an assumption?
Well, to be very honest, we didn't do it yet because of exactly that. We did it with elder titles, you could say, and that's a great business case. But what we're talking about here is new films, for international release. But what I think is interesting, and we've been talking about a lot and trying to do analysis, is why does that VOD model and premium VOD model work in the US and UK? Just mentioned Curzon and Magnolia, IFC, so forth. They have fantastic business models there. Why is it that we do not try to do something like that in, for example, Scandinavia? Still, we do not have any. We don't have any examples of films that were hyped enough to create that kind of buzz. So the few times that something is tried out, it's older titles, or it's something that cannot generate interest, and that is the major issue and the major problem here.
I should say, if you're not aware of the concept, premium VOD is a VOD release very close to the cinematic premiere, where the price is higher than it would be for a normal transactional VOD. So you pay as much as 1 movie ticket, or even the price of 2 movie tickets to see it at home. And that has had some success. It's not entirely clear. You can read more about that here. But that shows some potential for certain kinds of films, certainly.
And what is interesting is the fact that, in the US, VOD, that normally in the Scandinavia you would think, VOD, then it's not, the best film. VOD is only for the biggest films, where you actually have the hype and you have the cast and everything. For example, Lars von Trier's Melancholia, and now Nymphomaniac coming out soon. They would definitely go on VOD. And if you have a little smaller film, Scandinavian film, they would go traditional.
All of you, actually, so there is this huge, as we've heard many times today, this resistance from the cinema exhibitors to deal with the windows. We know that Michael thinks that they should. Jérôme, do you think that the cinema exhibitors should compromise on the exclusivity of the 4-month window?
Of course, as everyone but exhibitor, I think that, but they don't. No, actually, even in France, it's changing a little bit, and we have a new report from René Bonnel, which is going really being taken in consideration by the government, where really the proposal is to reduce again, based film per film case, the window to 6 weeks. So we start to be more or less on date. And we had some experiment supported by media in the UK, Germany, and France, tied in France with some example of day-and-date release, where exhibitors were more or less okay to do a little of experiment on that. The point is that it was not successful at all. But maybe once again, the title, as Rikke said, they didn't do the experiment with very strong titles. So
and
that's
the audiences
the
don't have the behavior yet either, so
of course,
they
and
need to
and
learn as well. Yeah,
that will take a lot of time,
yeah.
certainly.
I don't. I think the day and date's one of those issues that when I was editing Screen International in 2004 to, however, long, you were constantly hearing the same argument, but it was 8 months was necessary, 6 months is necessary, 5. So there's always a line in the sand. And it may be that there is a problem, actually. It may be genuinely that there is a threat. But to me, that's not the big threat. The big threat, I think, comes in a couple of ways. One, I think that we underestimate the impact of price right now. And I've just done a piece of research which will be made publicly available as well. But it's a piece of research about a focus groups, about what people think about cinema and VOD. And those a Netflix account right now, for if you've got a group, if you live in a house of 6 people, I mean, piracy seems like a lot of effort for 60p a week or whatever it is for per person in that house. But we're handing over the world, in my opinion, to Netflix in a way that's quite worrying. But price is going to be critical, and people were saying they felt cinema was expensive. So it isn't going to be the date. It's not going to be, oh, I fancy going out tonight to the cinema, or shall I stay at home? I think price is going to be a key factor.
Yeah.
The second point that I think really I think is important to understand again is also about the nature of demand, which is one of the things that came out of this was, the dream of day and date is where you don't have an art house cinema locally, you'll get to see it at the same time as everyone else. What we found from the research we've done, and we're going to extend this to a much bigger piece, is actually people don't give a damn outside of, if you're not outside the town, because you're not part of the zeitgeist anyway. It doesn't matter. So you don't see the film for 3 months, and you live in a town that doesn't have any art house cinema. Well, our problem is that it's the demand for art house cinema we need to build. Our problem is in visibility and lack of demand, but how do we create that so that on-demand platforms want it?
But that is changing as well. Being part of the zeitgeist is available in a way. I mean, I think everybody here, if you're young enough to have been a kid in the late 90s and you're not from a big city, the reason you work in this industry today is because you were on the internet and you had a possibility, even though you're from rural, Jutland, to be part of that conversation. And that segment, how do we speak to those consumers? How do we grow those markets? And again, it's a new behavior. We have to teach that we have to build the art house audience in villages.
I agree with you. That wasn't really my point. Was I think that our problem is the same issue with piracy. We have an idea that of piracy destroying piracy. We need to be visible. Art house cinema has to fight for a place, because the one finite fact in the world around us right now is time. That's what we're fighting for. We're not fighting against other windows. There is one fixed element in the whole world, and that is the 24-hour clock. And we're trying to find our way to do anything. And our problem is, how do we create demand full stop, so that people are actually demanding us and they will look at us? And I think art house cinema and the industry spends far too much time talking about process and not enough about the nature of what they're doing.
I would like to let the audience in, because we're running out of time as ever. You have absolutely no more than 60 seconds to make your statement or question. Would anybody have one? Do you have anything on your mind? I can't see you. You have no opinion. You're just, I hear the mumbling. I do. So clearly you have some opinion. Yes, please. for practical reasons, I should just say that were any cinema exhibitors asked to be here today. For practical reasons, that was not possible at the time, but I have spoken to them during the week. And when it comes to the big monopoly, when they stand on a stage next to a representative from Telia, they say there is absolutely no way that they will ever compromise on this issue. That's where 85% of in Sweden where we are. Mm? Yeah, so you say there's strong resistance in Norway as well. And I should add that the other thing that we found out we're speaking to cinema exhibitors this week is that even the smaller cinemas that are experimenting with this, then you don't have a big reach. But they say that the big ones, when you speak to them privately and they're not standing next to an ISP, then they actually say, maybe we're interested in doing that. But collectively, the public opinion is that they're not. That's where we are today. Yeah, and it is a principle. Do we have any other questions? Sorry? Yeah. They're over there, please. Is it? Mm. That's great, Lothar. I'd like for the panel to comment on this. Yeah? So the question is, we haven't spoken about the contrary market forces. So you want to sell rights for the rights and license fees that we haven't spoken about. You want to sell to as many as you can, but then at the same time, many of your customers there will want to have exclusive rights. How do we approach this? Where do we begin? Rikke?
Well, we are in a big dilemma here because I would love to try out to do a day and date release all over Europe if that's possible, but that would pretty much kill our own business. And I think a lot of distributors here, I can't see anyone because the light is so strong, but they would agree with me. So in that way, we are also hanging on, to the old system until somebody else than us, because we can't risk it, takes the chance and actually tries it. So I think no one in the private business would actually be bold enough to say, you know what, we have this great new film, let's try it out, and see what happens if we don't actually sell territory, the rights to any territory, but just focus on one big market.
Jérôme, Paillard.
But on the exclusivity, I think also you are thinking about the streaming of VOD. Netflix wanted to get exclusive rights. That's also the question, and I think, but you know better than me, it's really the question of how much financing or MG you can get if it's exclusive versus non-exclusive, which in general you don't have any MG. So maybe it's more that balance, and it works only for big films, I guess.
Yeah. You could say that 10 years ago we had this phrase saying the internet rights are frozen, and then that's it. We didn't even discuss it. And I think it's 15, I don't know. But then it was quite easy actually to negotiate lost the word here. Non-exclusive right, thank you. But now everyone demands exclusive rights, also to the VOD, because they need to be in total control of who is actually showing the film where and when. They can't afford that somebody like us suddenly would make a VOD platform and just, put it into their territory. So
Bengt is humming.
I was just thinking that right now, I think it's here. Right now we are trying to have the old model fit to a new environment, instead of looking at the new environment to see what we do have to change. And I think it's a superior when you have to do it like this, but the change will come quite quick.
I think we need to have two conversations. Basically, we need to have what can we do now and where do we want to go? And those are two completely separate conversations. And I think that they're both harmed if we're trying to have them if we're trying to treat them as the same thing. Michael, very briefly.
Just quickly on that point, I think there is we're assuming that we're in charge of where we're going. We're assuming that audiences and opportunities aren't just going to come along without us having any say. I just want to mention on license fee, because it explains the contradiction. One of the things I think is going to be an issue now, having done a couple of bits of work for broadcasters recently, is the traditional broadcast payers, including public service television, are turning around and saying, hold on a second, we haven't got the window, the whole deal with us. Now, they are proper funders of film, big funders of film. They're turning around and saying, we used to have the first window. We used to be the first time you'd see it on television, and all of a sudden, you've got these new brash young VOD channels and pay TV channels coming in, and people are wanting to sell them exclusive rights. I think we should be aware that actually that might affect some of the license fee that we think is always going to stay there. We might find we've bowed down to the VOD channels at the cost of television.
Very, very interesting. And if you want to look more about the branding of content across platforms and this problems relating to this, also I have to refer to the report because we're running out of time. I'm going to ask you guys one last question, which is, what would you like to know that you don't know today? What do you need to know? If we get 17 million crowns to answer all the questions of the industry, what would you like to know, Jérôme?
So I don't know if is it the last question, because
it's the last question. So if you have another comment,
so I go to
squeeze it
something
in.
else, because I really want to go back to something which is not in this report, and I agree on this wonderful job you did.
Yes.
But I think something is really missing is, as I mentioned, the theatrical part.
Yes.
And I think really that the convergence between social media and film and what we like in film can be festivals and something which is emerging now, which is theatrical on demand. They have a lot of experiment in different countries. In the US, it's Stug or Gather. In the UK, actually now, Picture House is launching a new service in March. You have in France, Septième Salle and I Like Cinema. In the Netherlands, I think you have.
Yes, sorry, we're running out of time. We have to keep it brief.
So no, but that's very important, because that's really where people can be bring and the audience can choose the kind of film they want to see in a theater.
Yeah.
And I think it's something which should be very supported by the producers, the distributors. Very few people are aware of that. And I think it's really maybe the last chance for art house films to find a possibility to be in the cinema.
I completely agree.
I think it's something who should be the sixth chapter on the next edition of
It should maybe be the first chapter in the next edition
Or
of this
maybe the
report.
first.
I've already put it in here like a big one. That's what we need to know more about. Michael, what do we need to know more about?
And really quickly, I've written a very big report as well, which I must say yours is fantastic. But for Cine Regio, they every year do this thing. It's a free download, and it'll be available from next week. And it does actually try to cover that topic. So
awesome.
Look out, cineregio.com. It's simple. Data and knowledge. It's a simple fact. We know less about the VOD audience than we knew about the box office audience. And we spent all of the time moaning about how we didn't really have the depth of knowledge about theatrical disseminated amongst the whole industry. Producers are going in the dark. And we're in a world where globalized businesses are landing on our shores, taking up bringing in huge numbers. It's in the top 20 of all of the most visited websites in Norway now, Netflix. But what do you know? What do we know? It's data is the missing link, and the data that connects audience to producer.
Yeah, and that's proprietary information. But I have to say that there is some movement finally in the VOD industry to start publicizing at least some of these numbers, and we'll see what we can do. Rikke, what would you like to know?
I would probably like to know when will the local governments that actually regulate on this actually understand that we are in the future now, that you cannot treat every film like it's the same film, because they are so very different, just like you have niche channels and you have TV, you have DVD, you have so many different things. So I think we just need data. Otherwise, it's impossible, to actually make any conclusions out of this. So I would like, a little bit more flexibility, and I would like to know when that decision is taken.
Fantastic. Bengt, what would you like to know?
I need more transparency. I mean, I all agree, but there are figures already. We could learn a lot about just if, for example, in Sweden, if the Film Institute could release the figures they have, we would have wonderful data about what's happening, especially to the small films, the art house films, the ones that actually are ended up in oblivion at the moment. So transparency?
I will say two things, and then we'll give everybody a big applause. One is that since we're a tiny little project, obviously we're not going to do any work that somebody else is doing. So, but we do hope that we can at least link very in a structured manner, so that the Synergy report and everything else, as they come out, you can also find them through Nostradamus if you don't have time to go on every website and look for them for yourself. I would also like for everyone in this room to think about what would you like to know, what do you need to know, what would make you make better decisions, and get in touch. Do we have a slide that says get in touch? Yeah, we're going to put some email addresses or things like that on on this website, or you can come and talk to me right now and I'll write down your questions. Let's hope this project continues. Thank you so much to Lindholmen Science Park and Nordisk Film och TV Fond, and thank you to all of our speakers, and of course especially Rikke Ennis, Jérôme Paillard and Michael Gubbins, who are here right now. Thank you also, Bengt. Thanks.